Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. It's July 6, 2025. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, this Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. story, people have asked me about, right? It's being reported a lot of different ways, right? Apparently, he is under some kind of arrest warrant in Mexico for alleged association with some cartel, right? Let me just make a few points as it pertains to boxing. I need for folks to understand the history of boxing, the ethos of boxing, right? In boxing, historically, and let's hope it stays this way, boxing's been laissez-faire, right? The only real question in boxing is not where you've been, not what you've done. It's who is the best fighter on the planet in the weight class, right? If that fighter has personal demons outside of the ring, that's that fighter's concern. If that fighter has a criminal past, that's that fighter's concern, right? If that fighter is involved in crime or under indictment, that's that fighter's concern. For the public, we just want to know, is he the best in the weight class? If he is, there is a word for him, and that word is champ. Okay, so I need for folks to understand that a reigning heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson, had an arrest warrant out for him. He was evading arrest, and he was still the heavyweight champion, right? He left the United States. We're not sure how. We believe it's through Canada. He went to Paris. He defended his title in Europe. Folks, he was still the heavyweight champion, right? Let me point out, Ali, of course, was accused of dodging the draft, right? He had, a case that was in the court system. He was not allowed to fight for a period of time. I believe that was a mistake, right? But understand, when Ali came back to the sport, he was allowed to come back to the sport. He was unbeaten. He fought for the heavyweight championship. Joe Frazier, the 64 Olympic champion, Ali was the 60 Olympic champion, had earned the belt in a box-off. And of course, Ali suffered his first loss at Madison Square Garden in that first fight against Joe Frazier. But understand, there again, boxing fans just wanted to know, is Ali still the best? Who do we call champ? Two guys, unbeaten records, both with legitimate claims at the championship. Ali was still viable, right? Understand, Ali's favorite fighter, Sugar Ray Robinson, right, was a military deserter. Let's go further. The guy Ali beat to become heavyweight champion, Sonny Liston, who famously said, "The only thing my father gave me was a beating." Right? Well, understand, Sonny Liston was a black man in St. Louis in 1956. He gets in a scuffle with a police officer. He breaks the cop's leg. Right now, depending on which story you believe, just know that there is a story out there. that Liston had some kind of affiliation with the mob, and that the mob helped Liston, again, a black man in the South, boxing prospect, has a scuffle with a police officer, breaks his leg. Liston's sentence, 9 months. He only served 6. Right? Understand, in boxing, you had a reigning middleweight champion, and he's on the Mount Rushmore of middleweight champions, Carlos Monzon. During his reign, he gets shot by his wife. Folks, his reign continued. So let me just say that Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., look, whatever he's doing outside the ring, that shouldn't impact his boxing career. Right? I don't think boxing should be, restricting who can participate in the sport. Let me say, too, when I was growing up, there was a guy in prison. Google him, James Hardrock Green. And he had such a big reputation as a fighter in prison that one of these networks, and I'm not talking about a cable network, I'm talking about an over-the-ear network. One of these networks started televising his fights. Contenders would actually go to, I believe it was Rahway State Prison or someplace like that, to fight him. Right? This was a guy who wasn't even out of prison. So, I think it's a strength that boxing has. We want to know who's the best. Understand, these fighters are independent contractors. Right? They're fighting for themselves. This isn't a team situation with a collective bargaining agreement and league corporate sponsors who need to be placated. No, this is just a sport where fans have a desire to know who's the best and who understand that a lot of guys in the sport come from backgrounds that you won't find on Leave It to Beaver. Right? I thought Sylvester Stallone did a great job in the movie Rocky. We understood all of this in the 70s. Right? In that movie, you remember, Rocky is really a mob enforcer. Right? There's a guy who's undefined who helps Rocky with his career. Right? And it's understood that Rocky, a guy from the neighborhood, living a middle-class life, right? A guy who has a crush on a girl named Adrian, right? We understood that Rocky needed money to take up the offer of Apollo Creed, who was then the heavyweight champion. And of course, that money may have come from a legal source, may have come from an illegal source. Let's say Rocky runs in some circles, right? And you also understood that, in some neighborhoods, there are some groups that maybe the outside world thinks of as being involved in illegal activity, but who might actually also have a Robin Hood type of approach to life where they're trying to help the neighborhood in their strange way. Right? So let me just say, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., when he's ready to get back in the ring, my only advice to him as a boxing fan is to start faster than he did against Jake Paul. Right? His life outside the ring is his life. right? If he is making decisions that carry risks, well, that's what he's doing. My focus is just on his boxing career, right? I understand that's not where we are in 2025, right? We want people to live the lives we want them to live, right? Thank God the sport is laissez faire, right? Understand too, what seems real, right? Jack Johnson, for example. You know, you're hearing that Jack Johnson has a arrest warrant out on him. Well, just understand, later, generations later, he was pardoned by President Trump. Understand, before President Trump, John McCain and Harry Reid wanted Jack Johnson to be pardoned, right? I'm sure there are kids in law school right now who are hearing about the ridiculous Jack Johnson conviction that resulted from the same warrant that had him on the run, right? Just understand over time how we view things change, right? At the time, you know, you can imagine there were certain crowds before whom Ali was hated, right? If you believe the movie The Greatest, starring Ali as the greatest, right? He is walking out of the ring after fighting Jerry Quarry, and a woman confronts him and says to him, "You arrogant bastard," right? You know, all I can say is, in the moment, don't get carried away by allegations, right? Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. hasn't been convicted of anything. These fighters are celebrities. We know how things go, too. You're in a club, you're hanging out, you're having a few drinks, some guys from the neighborhood come by, somebody takes out a cell phone, takes a photo of you. Then later it comes out that the guy from the neighborhood who came by might have, you know, some issues with law enforcement. Of course, the photo's out there. Now you're supposed to be part of whatever criminal enterprise he's involved with, right? Let's not jump to conclusions, but let's not also ban anyone for any rumor and innuendo. And let's understand, too, that even if Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. were thrown in jail for wrongdoing, we would still want to know whether he's the best in his weight class. We would still want to know where he ranks in his weight class. We would still want to know whether some other fighter, some young up-and-comer, or some KG vet who's making a late career run can beat him, right? Because it's about the boxing, not the athlete's lifestyle outside of the ring, right? You know, I want athletes, when asked about their outside the ring activity, right? If some athlete goes up to Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. outside the presence of his attorney, who would clearly tell him not to respond to questions, and asks him what's going on, I hope Chavez Jr. is able to respond, "I'm a fighter. In the ring, I follow the rules. My private life outside of the ring is my private life." Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.